Great Convos Season 5 is here, and we're coming in strong.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of Great Convos, where we always say, whether you agree or disagree, you can always find great convos. I'm Roger Caesar, and that gentleman over there.
Hi, Roger. I am Alexandre. Matt, we are both having fun today. And just as Einstein said a while back, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Isn't that right, Roger?
Considering he was not around when the internet was formed, it is a funny quote, to say the least. First and foremost, thank you to everyone who has joined us. Look at the chat is already blowing up. I love it. Welcome to all our loyal listeners who have always come in and listened to us. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we thank you so much for being here. Man, this is a good episode, isn't it, Alexandre? We are going to have a lot of fun with this one, and we're going to hope that also our listeners will chime in as well as we talk about misquoting quotes.
That's right. So don't quote me on that, Roger. But I am today the context guy. I think this is one of the big things that we're going to elaborate on, discuss today. What is the context of the quote that you're using? And you, Roger, are the credibility guy. Now,
that's right.
Isn't that one reason why we would use quotes, Roger, for credibility?
Well, we use them, but it's a matter of when we're talking about credibility, it's knowing if the quote that you are using is actually a true quote.
That's right.
Making sure. Yeah.
Otherwise, it could ruin your credibility. So
that's
sometimes
right.
We use speech. We use quotes in a speech. We might use it as an opener, a first line, or anywhere else in the speech in order to give more weight to our speech. But what if it does actually the opposite? What if, in other words, what if we're getting it wrong?
Yes.
So today, Roger, I want to discuss with you. We'll see how many we can go, how many types of misquotes that we can do today. But we'll at least do one of them is quoting out of context, and the other one would be quoting fake quotes. And stick around, we might get a surprise for you as a third misquote. Or wrong usage of quote.
Now, Alex, before we even get started with all of that, I would often say that sometimes, now either it's good or bad, but the fact is that if you are quoted, then obviously you were remembered for something. Obviously, you would love it if it's something good that you are quoted on. But let me ask you, Alex, have you ever had somebody quote you?
Yeah, I can't think of specific examples, but I recall individuals occasionally telling me, "Hey, you know, when you said at that particular event, well, I quoted you. I talked about you and your speech, and I quoted this." And I think that's great. That's exactly why we take the stage, right? So that our words can not only be remembered but then repeated. So it's a what do you call it? A snowball effect or a domino effect that our wisdom hopefully goes elsewhere.
Yeah, I remember there was a gentleman in our former district who came up to me back in, that was probably 2018. And it was such an honor to hear him say this. He said, I have followed you for so long. I even have a lot of your quotes in a book. And he showed me this book with all these quotes, and he called it Rogerisms, as he put it. But he had all of these quotes that I have said, and I thought that was such an honor to have something like that done. And I think that's what we love. Is anybody would love it if somebody would be able to take and remember something powerful that we said, that they can use in a speech at some point, or even in conversation. They say, oh, as let's use one of our listeners, as Kathy would say, which reminds me, before we even go any further, congratulations, Kathy, on becoming a DTM. For those of you who do not know, that is a distinguished Toastmaster. It is the highest level you can achieve in Toastmasters, and Kathy just got that. So I'm giving you a round of applause right now for that, Kathy. Congratulations. But you'd want to have that moment where people say, you know, I quoted Alexandre, I quoted Roger on this, and that's an honor.
It is. Now, would it be an honor if someone quoted you, but quoted you so much out of context that the meaning is the opposite of what you meant?
That is what we are here to debunk today.
I'll give you one example. I think this is when I really realized the importance of researching what you're actually saying, including quotes. So quotes on the internet, I think Abraham Lincoln said this. The problem with quotes on the internet is that they're often wrong. Abraham Lincoln.
Again, another one.
Yeah, that's right. I just saw that today. Now, that's obviously fake, right?
Mhm.
One with Will Einstein also, but there are other fake quotes that we don't know, or out of context quotes. So here's one example. A while ago, I really liked this quote from a book by Daniel Pennac. So bear with me, Roger. Si vous voulez vraiment rêver, réveillez-vous. If you really want to dream, wake up. When I saw this, I thought, this is a great motivational quote. If you want your dream to come true, it's not by just dreaming and thinking about it. You need to wake up and start acting on it. Now, I'm not sure if I'm the one that's offline or if Roger is the one who's offline. And oh, it appears that it was Roger. Okay, it looks like I'm still online. Okay, so I'll continue with this particular quote. If you really want to dream, wake up. So I thought this was great. Then I read the book. What a concept, right? Research what I was actually saying. And I looked at the context of that quote, and it's actually the opposite. What the author was saying was he was describing a situation that was so absurd that he was saying sometimes reality feels like more of a dream than actual dreams. If you really want to dream, wake up. So I was thinking it all backwards. So when I realized that, I thought maybe it's time that when we use a quote, we need to really know what we're saying. Now, Roger is trying to come back in. I will click right here to see if we can get him back. Hi, Roger.
See me?
I do.
Guess what just happened? This is the beauty of being live. All the power went out in the office here. So I am on my cell phone. I apologize for that, but I am back. So I won't be able to get into anything else, but you'll have to deal with all of the comments and let me.
All right.
So it's
no problem.
Darkness, but hopefully you can still see me.
Right. Thanks. So that's the context of misquoting or quoting out of context. So we could get different examples, and the one that you wanted to share was about money and evil, Roger.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, we have always heard money is the root of all evil. Tell me if you've heard that quote before. Now, Alex, why don't you share with them what the real quote is when it comes to this?
And this comes from the Bible. Money is the root of all evil. So here's the big lesson about quoting. If you just find it on the internet, first of all, it might be completely wrong. But also, even if it is right, we want you to find the full context of it. So this is sort of both here. So this is a little bit wrong, but also maybe out of context. And when you look at the real source, it actually means something else. Here it is. It's from the King James Bible. The love of money is the root of all evil. So it almost means the same thing, but it's very different in its meaning at the same time.
That's right.
Money is not necessarily evil. It's the love of money that's evil.
That's right.
According to this here.
And this is what it is. Sometimes just one word, it can change and alter a complete quote. right? And this is what we have to be careful of when we are looking at looking for quotes. Do we have any others that we can let them
Well,
know about?
well, here's one that Lyubov is sharing with us. Now, I've not heard this one. Sometimes I can hear my bones straining under the weight of all the lives I'm not living.
Wow.
From Jonathan S4. Now,
Mm,
very interesting. Now, Lyubov, or anybody who would want to use this quote, I recommend, if it's not already, if you haven't done so already, to read the full book so you know the full context of that.
correct.
What it said.
Correct. Correct. We've had other ones as well that we were talking about beforehand. And again, I don't have access to them on my phone right here. But Alex, the reality is that sometimes we use these because we've been so used to hearing them. Isn't that what it really comes down to? We're so used to hearing these
Mhm.
quotes that it almost becomes the norm to say it. But when you actually pull back the covers and see where these quotes come from, you realize, hey, maybe this isn't what I needed to say in this particular speech, right?
Mhm. That's right. So again, research what you're saying. I mean, it's always a good it's always a good idea to know what you're saying. And if you're quoting someone, wouldn't you want to know the full context? Like quoting another researcher or an author or another speaker or someone from the past can add credibility, can add weight to what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But consider this, Roger, if you quote someone and then someone comes after you and says, "Oh, I love that author. What did you think of this particular book?" And you're like, "Oh, I
That's
don't know. I
right.
just found it online."
That's right. That's
What does
right.
that do to your credibility?
Exactly. Exactly. So it's often very important to do your research, find out what it actually means, and then maybe even go a little step further. As you just said, Alex, learn a bit about that actual author or that person so that if the conversation does come up, you can actually have that convo with someone
Mhm.
talking about that individual or that author and make it or show that you actually have credibility in stating or using their quotes in your particular speech.
Exactly. More knowledge is usually a good thing.
Yes. Yes. What do we have on
Roger,
the screen? What are people saying right now?
well, people are happy that you're back. That's for sure.
Well, thank you.
Um, and Lyubov did answer to our question and said she's reading the book and it's full of wonderful quotes.
Awesome.
Suzanne says, "I love to research the quotes." So
Hmm.
this is great. And one thing that's particularly good about this is that especially if you find a quote that's just online, when you actually research it, you find the book and you read it in full context. Maybe you
Right.
won't even find that quote.
Yeah.
That's I'll mention one thing that was part of our first episode. In our first episode, do you remember we talked about customer service
Yes.
and we used the phrase "the customer is always right."
Yes.
Now we got one comment on YouTube that said, "Oh, that's not the full quote. The full quote is the customer is always right in matters of taste."
Really?
Yeah. So I thought, oh, this is interesting. We were using a quote and not using it in full context. So I did some digging, and you know what I found out?
What?
That correction is incorrect.
Oh, so it's fake.
And it's fake. And actually, the initial the customer is always right. It's sort of an amalgam, like a mix-up of what two different authors or researchers or marketers said at the
Right.
beginning of the 20th century, and it evolved to become the customer is always right. Now, it
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean, as we said, we don't need to beleaguer this, overly labor this point. You can go back to the episode 1 of season 5, but it doesn't just mean that the customer is always right at all times.
Right.
But the quote is still, the customer is always right.
So what about, so let's talk about that for a quick second. When what happens when we hear somebody quoting something that we know isn't fully correct? Have you ever had a moment when you've seen someone speaking, and maybe even our listeners can chime in on this, where you've heard someone say something or they've spoken, done a speech, and you realize that that quote's not correct.
Yeah, and yes, and one of the best examples is this one. You've heard this before. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
And yes, and most people think that that was from Einstein,
Albert Einstein. That's right.
right?
Which makes total sense. But in fact, he never said that. And in in reality, he would probably be upset. I'm just guessing here. He might be upset that we are using that as a quote from the world's greatest scientist, because doing something over and over again and expecting different results is not insanity. It's the way that you do research.
That's correct. In some ways, it's true.
You do the same thing, or slightly different, but you
Change it, but that's but though well wait but in a way you see you just changed it. You said by slightly doing something different. That's not what he was saying or what the quote says.
right. I mean, I
Okay, so
love the quote.
you're
It's
changing
just
it.
not from Albert Einstein.
What do you mean?
I love the quote.
Yeah,
I love the quote. It's just not from Albert Einstein.
that's right.
So
That's right.
let's stop saying that it is. And of course, anything that we're saying here, don't take our word for it. You can research it and try to find, like, if you think, no, of course he said that. I know that. I've always heard that before. Find the real source. Find the origin of that quote and see if you can find it. And if you find it, show it to me, because I've never found it.
And if we are wrong on any of these things as well, hey, we're human. But if you do see something that we're talking about here that you see differently, please let us know as well. Let us know. This is why we want you to continuously have the conversations about this, right?
So we're now at the second misquoting, the way the some of as a mistake that speakers make, and here's a quick note. Lyubov writes this: Mike Carr said. So now she's quoting something that Mike Carr said.
Yes.
He said, until you.
Let's give it in context. Mike Carr is the 2020 world champion of public speaking. So
That's right. And Mike Carr said, until you crack your chest open and show me your heart, you're wasting my time. So if we say, as Mike Carr said, it's, well, then we're misattributing the quote, because he was actually quoting someone else. So that's something to be wary of also. So we'll get into that. But misattributing a quote is also a way to lower your own credibility.
Yes. Yes. It is very important to understand that, like, sometimes if one of us says something, because of who we are, you might think it is from us, but we as speakers obviously have to remember, and we talk about this even when it comes to competing at the highest level, Alex. Let's just from that perspective, we can be disqualified if we do not attribute the quotes by somebody, or in our conversations or in our speeches. If we do not attribute the credit to that person, this also happens. Oh, we got a good friend of mine. Look at that, Curtis. How you doing, Curtis? Shout out to you for coming on.
Curtis, thanks for weighing in on the customer is always right here. So we could find plenty of examples of famous quotes that are completely fabricated, and you can actually search for this. And what's interesting is that when we were researching for this particular episode, you shared with me an article from, what is it, Wealth Management. And there's 47 quotes that are not used correctly, or that are either misattributed or misquoted or completely fabricated.
Yeah.
And when I was going through that, I thought, there's no source here. So we would need it, because I want to be really sure.
For the source.
Exactly.
The source, if we wanted the source.
Yeah. So this is why, go back to the beginning. Really research what you're talking about. Here's one great example that is it actually a fake quote, or is it out of context? It's a bit of both. You've heard this before. Nice guys finish last.
Yes.
Now, why In which context do we usually hear this, Roger?
It's usually said if you are too nice of a person, that a lot of times you get the short end of the stick when it comes to anything in life. And that's why they use this quote that nice guys always finish last. They always even put always finish last, but the quote there is nice guys finish last.
Right.
Where did that actually come from?
Well, this is from Léo Durocher. And I had no idea, but this was in baseball. He was with was it the Giants or the Dodgers? One of those teams. There was a rivalry between both teams in baseball, and he was talking about a right fielder of the other team, saying, "Oh, he's too nice. He's a nice guy, so he doesn't play as effectively as he can." I'm completely making stuff up here, but I'm paraphrasing. But he was saying, nice guys finish 7th place.
Yeah.
Because that's where they were in the rankings.
That's right. That's right.
So it is not as catchy.
Yeah.
But when he was quoted, he was requoted in an article, they changed what he said. So it's true that it was written, nice guys finish last, but that's not what he was saying. And then so it's not only a fake quote, but it's also out of context. He was talking about baseball. He was talking about sports. But now we use that sentence as a way to say that if you're too nice, you might not go far in business or even romance, for example.
Yep. And this again goes back to what we said, that you have to make sure that you go back and research everything that you that is said, and make sure that you know the context, right? Context guy, you have to know the context with being said.
Mm-hmm. So before we end, Roger, I do want to touch on this particular thing because there's a question here from Leobov. What is your opinion on using quotes in a speech? We haven't really given our honest opinion here. Yes or no?
Roger? Well, let me say this. I rarely use quotes in my speeches. It's not something that I've often done, but when I do use it, I make sure that it's contributed to something that I'm speaking to within my speech. There's no right or wrong answer to this, I believe, because if you're doing it the correct way, it could definitely enhance your speech. Plus, also, again, as I said before, the idea that you are remembering someone saying something so powerful that you can use it in your speech in some way, shape, or form is a great thing. Mm-hmm. But if you can actually be the one to create your own quotes that people start to use, I think that's more powerful.
Right. I'll give maybe a final note to one of our viewers, but before I do want to touch on using cliches.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Hold on. You asked me a question. What about you? What do you think about it?
Well, okay, I'm going to touch on that, and I'll answer with with this last element as well. Quotes used in. I wouldn't use a quote just to use a quote. And I agree with what you've just said. If you can create something that's better, it's even better. So I'll come back to the example of if you really want to dream, wake up. I misuse that so much. If I were to say that sentiment, I might change it. I might try to make it my own. You talked about Rogerisms. Maybe there's a way to have Alexandrisms as well. It doesn't flow on the tongue as much. So maybe I would say, if you want your dreams to come true, wake up. Now, has it been used already? Maybe. That's why I'll have to research it. And by the way, this is what you can do too. If you want to create something new and you think you're inventing a new quote, maybe you're not. You might want to research that. So I would use quotes if it's something that is well researched, that I know really, truly, and fully, that is in context, and that is also not a cliche. So if I can find those criteria, then yeah, I would totally use quotes, and I do. I'll give you an example of a cliche, and let me know, Roger, what you think of using things that are so often used that for me it sort of waters down the quality of your speech. For example, shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you will land among the stars. Sounds nice, eh?
I think that, and I get what you're saying. If we've overheard it, it's oversaturated, and at times when you hear it, it's almost like it's just thrown in as a filler.
Yeah.
I get that. But there are times when that, like even that quote right there, simply put, it motivates people. It motivates them to go further than they've ever expected. And if they land a little shorter than they thought, well, then at least it's better than they ever expected in the beginning. So sometimes, again, if used correctly, it works. If not, it just becomes another mute point.
Mute point. Yes, I like that. Moot point. You said mute, yes. As you're muted. Now, this from Steve makes a lot of sense to me. Find a quote that is not well known, or use one that is personal, or used by someone in your life. Yeah, because then it becomes much more personal, and it's from you. It's not like, oh, I found this on the internet, it was good. And by the way, about the moon and the stars, if you shoot for the moon and you miss, you might not land among the stars. You might just be in orbit around the sun, around the Earth, or around another planet of the solar system. The stars are very far away, so that's another reason why that particular quote bothers me.
You had to take it to a different level, but that's okay.
So I want to come back to Curtis to end the show, because I really like what he's written here.
Yeah. What do you say?
So Curtis writes, if we were to say a sentence to someone and it is passed on, then the full sentence is broken down and simplified to the point where the full meaning can be lost over time. That's not good for the speaker. Hence, quotes can over time be muddied. So imagine
but Alex, isn't that like the broken telephone line that they always say, right?
Yes.
Telephone line where it starts one way and then it ends up being completely different from what it originally started as.
So imagine, Roger, you're full of wisdom every time you're on stage, and someone quotes you wrongly or invents something. It's no longer a great honor for you.
No.
So put yourself in the shoes of Einstein or Lincoln or whoever else we mentioned before. If people are always misquoting you, is it an honor? No. I don't think so.
No. And that's why I said you want it to be good, not bad.
Exactly.
Well, we have reached the end of this session. A great conversation. And I'm sorry again that the power went out, but hey, it's live and we try to make it work and we do what we can. And this is what the beauty of being able to think on your feet is all about. But I hope that you continue the conversation. I hope that you go out and see, look, research and see what quotes are out there that maybe are being said incorrectly, and continue to have the conversation with others. Thank you for all of our loyal listeners who are here today. Thank you for those who are brand new that came in and participated in the conversation. We appreciate you. And as we always say, whether you agree or disagree, you can always find great combos. Have a wonderful week.
See you next week.